adventure on Route 33, exactly one half as exciting as those on Route 66. Damn it, I said, in my loudest and angriest voice. This just doesn't work. This stupid thing won't go straight ahead. I was behind the wheel of our family's 1955 Buick Roadmaster, parked in front of the Redlands house, which had been our home for 3 years. Attached to a rental tow bar slung from the Buick's rear bumper was my second car, an aging but still useful 1952 Dodge two-door. I was fond of this somewhat beat-up old car, purchased for $150 from an also beat-up but lovable lady named Blanche, who worked in the same hospital I did. Rita and I and our 3 children, ages 3, 5, and 3 months, were moving from Redlands to the San Francisco Bay Area, where I was scheduled to begin a 9-month course of study at the School of Public Health at UC Berkeley. This, in fact, was the moment of our departure, all 5 of us inside the Buick, ready to head north. Unfortunately, we didn't seem to be headed anywhere. Somehow, the steering mechanism of the Dodge could not accommodate itself to the demands of the tow bar. A simple case of basic incompatibility, I later learned. We had to leave that morning. The moving truck with all our household and personal belongings had pulled out the previous evening, leaving us with 1 suitcase each and a number of odd, bulky leftover items which were jammed into the passenger compartment of the Dodge, a useful overflow space for our trip. Quickly and decisively sizing up our options, I generated a plan. We would just have to drive the 2 cars all the way. I unhooked the Dodge from the tow bar, ascertained that it by itself had no steering problem, and gave directions to Rita. She would drive the Buick with the 3 kids, and I would drive the Dodge. When I explained this rather significant change in our travel plans, she responded sweetly and succinctly, "Not on your life, Teddy boy. You know I don't normally drive more than 15 or 20 miles out of town. If you think I'm up for 400 miles, you're sadly mistaken." Putting my brain into high gear and consulting the road map, I came up with a compromise solution. Rita would drive with the kids in the Buick, and I in the Dodge about 60 miles to the train station in Burbank. This was the nearest stop on the route of the Coast Daylight running north to the Bay Area. There we would leave the Dodge, all 5 of us proceeding as planned in the Buick. A day or 2 later, I would ride the train back to Burbank, pick up the Dodge, and drive it north. Rita was leery about the 60 miles on I-10, a busy freeway even in 1964. For my part, I was a bit anxious at the prospect of driving the Dodge on that long trip in hot summer temperatures. I knew it had a tendency, even in city driving, to overheat. However, it seemed like the only viable solution. I don't know if they rented car carriers at the time, as they do now, but if they did, I didn't consider that possibility. So, Rita ultimately acceded to the plan, and we set off. Our trip to Burbank was uneventful, as was the long day's drive from there on to San Mateo, where we would be staying with Rita's parents before moving into Cal's student housing complex in Albany Village. At some point during the 2 days before I planned to return to Burbank, I decided to take 5-year-old Eddie with me. I was sure he would enjoy the excitement of the train ride, as well as the return drive in the Dodge. So, the next morning, he and I boarded the train in San Mateo, and by late afternoon, we dismounted at the Burbank station to find our faithful car waiting patiently for us. I had temporarily forgotten how jam-packed the car was with our leftovers from the packing. To make room for both Eddie and me in the front seat, we had to consolidate everything in the back seat. The trunk was already filled to overflowing. I remember one item which topped off the back seat pile, an ordinary straw broom sticking up jauntily from the mass of bric-a-brac. Our destination that night was Ventura. It was nearly dark when we found a motel along the main street. We pulled in with the temperature gauge at its maximum reading and steam blowing up from under the hood. I was glad to park it in front of our room for the night. I tried not to dwell on what the next day's drive would be like. Next morning, after a quick breakfast, which I had brought with us, we hit the road towards Ojai. Not wanting to drive that car on the busy high-speed 101, I elected to make a good part of our trip on State Highway 33, which traveled through the San Joaquin Valley somewhat west of and roughly paralleling I-5 as far as Coalinga, at which point we would turn west on other secondary roads to join 101 at either King City or Salinas for our final leg into San Mateo. It proved to be a very scenic drive in a largely unpopulated portion of California. The traffic was sparse, which made the driving comfortable and relaxed, except for the need to keep a close eye on the temperature gauge. We stopped about every 30 minutes to fill the radiator with water. Actually, we stopped at every tiny crossroads town where there was a source of water. They turned out to be an average of 25 or so miles apart. At our leisurely pace and quiet surroundings, there was lots of time for father-son sharing. Eddie was full of stories about his life and about being 5, as well as ongoing commentary about whatever sights we were passing. The relaxation we felt was rudely interrupted in the late morning when the engine quit and we slowly coasted to a stop along the shoulder. The problem turned out to be no mystery. We had simply run out of gas. The 2-lane road stretched peacefully ahead. We had not encountered another car in 15 or 20 minutes. I soon came up with a solution. Just before stopping, we had passed a road sign indicating the town of Blackwell's Corner 2 miles ahead. I could walk it, but it was too far for Eddie, and I didn't want to leave him alone with the car. As luck would have it, on the back bumper of the Dodge, I had long ago attached a sort of homemade bicycle rack into which I had placed, for our move, my old 3-speed bike. I got it unleashed and on its wheels, then helped Eddie climb up onto the handlebars. With my feet providing the pedal power, we proceeded to ride blithely through the bucolic countryside into town, where we easily located a small gas station willing to sell us a gallon in a borrowed gas can. Eddie had to hold the gas for our 2-mile ride back to the car. Today I cannot imagine myself running out of gas on such a trip. Back then I must have been a good deal more loose-minded. That turned out to be the highlight of the day. We continued on, making our necessary stops for water, and by early evening we were back in the bosom of our family. The Dodge and its bike rack proved to be the perfect answer to the difficult parking situation on and around the Berkeley campus. Albany Village was 5 or 6 miles away, so every day I commuted to a neighborhood adjacent to school where I could park the car on the street. I then unloaded the bike and pedaled on into campus and the convenient bike racks directly in front of Earl Warren Hall, the location of the School of Public Health, where all my classes were held. I remember making that ride even on rainy days, which were frequent that year. I was apparently younger and hardier back then. That was also the year when, in the midst of a full-time graduate school schedule, I managed to play golf on at least a dozen courses all around the Bay Area, from Napa to Alameda to San Francisco to Oakland. Except when the rain was at its worst, I think I got out to a golf course about 3 times a week. But then that's another story altogether.